So I want to take you back to the winter of 1994. I was 29 years old, which is really odd because I'm still 29. I had just moved back to my hometown of Atlanta from Los Angeles, married an adorable French chef, and I was in Atlanta taking some time to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. After 4 years studying drama at Carnegie Mellon University, a short stint in the soap opera world, and performing in a lot of plays that never really actually paid enough to cover any of my bills, I started to realize that my once dream of having a 50-year career in the theater might take 50 years to attain. I was at an audition for a Home Depot commercial, which back then, by the way, would have paid my bills for an entire year. Home Depot. But I heard the director whisper to his client that I would be perfect for the job if I was only 10 pounds thinner and had better hair. Yeah. Not that I don't love Home Depot. It was really a pivotal moment for me. I started to think that maybe I needed a second plan. Now, if you're not aware of this, most aspiring performers always have a second job in the restaurant industry. And I was no exception. I'd worked in the restaurant industry my entire life, and I secretly loved it. For me, it's like the closest thing that you can get to theater. You've got the drama of the kitchen and the front of house staff and the customers. It's spectacular. So I started thinking, what could I do to do what I now know Michelle Obama calls a swerve, where you think you start doing one thing, but then you swerve and suddenly you're doing something else. So I decided I was going to learn how to cook. But I didn't want to take the easy way out and ask my cute French chef husband how to make a few things. And I didn't want to go to culinary school. I had a great idea. I wanted to travel around the world, meet people in bus stations and bars and street corners, and convince them to take me back to their house and teach me a recipe from their community or from their culture or country. I mean, it sounds awesome, doesn't it? I really can't think of one single person, including that sweet French chef, that thought this was a good idea. But they saw the look in my eyes, and 6 months later, we had our little red rolling bags packed, and we were off for an 18-month trip around the world. Oh, and don't think I had any money, because I didn't. I'm pretty sure that we left Atlanta with maybe $5,000 or $6,000 in our pocket, and one of those around-the-world tickets where you can get a certain number of stops within a year. And by the way, I Googled it before I came, and those tickets are still available, and they're not as expensive as you think, if anyone's interested. The trip, besides the decision I made to adopt my child at the age of 39, that trip was the best thing that has ever happened to me. There were so many recipes and there were so many stories. I learned to make green papaya salad with dried shrimps from this fisherman in a tiny village in Thailand. Shakshuka from a janitor in the basement of an Israeli hotel. And if you don't know what shakshuka is, it's this stew made with peppers and tomatoes, and then it's topped with poached eggs and feta cheese and basil. Oh my God, it's incredible. I also learned to make this Irby chicken soup from a Greek family that even though they had a kitchen, they preferred to cook on this tiny camper stove in their garage because it was the place where they had a full view of the Adriatic Sea. I mean, the recipes, the stories, they were endless. When I came home, I remember sitting in my tiny apartment on the floor, and I was surrounded by these scraps of paper of all the recipes that I'd gathered together, and I was willing them to talk to me, and they did. I suddenly realized that 90%, if not more, of all of these recipes were soups. Soup. That was the answer. It was the perfect food. I mean, soup, it isn't that hard to make, but it takes a lot of love and attention, and it's the perfect tool to gather people around the table, which is also another favorite thing I love doing. Once again, the naysayers appeared, including that now not so adorable French chef, who's no longer in the picture, by the way. They said things like, Jenny, it's the South. No one's going to eat soup in the South. It's 100 degrees. Or, do you understand, Jennifer, that you have no experience as a professional cook? I mean, how are you going to know how much food to make or who's coming or what to cook? Or you know that this is going to be a lot harder than you think, right? I mean, it's not like they were wrong. I had zero experience, and I really didn't know what I was doing. But I had one thing. I was willing to know that if I showed up for myself every day, that it was possible. I didn't know how, but I was willing to get in the ring and try it out. So I started small. Once again, I didn't really have any money, so I would go to the farmer's market out on Buford Highway. I'd get all the ingredients to make a pot of soup in a borrowed kitchen at a local church, and then I would basically hand deliver it to anyone who was interested, which is mostly like friends of my parents who I would beg to buy a quart of soup. But what I found out, that when you really believe in something and start doing it authentically, that people start to notice. And that one pot of soup turned into two. The two turned into four. And in September of 1999, the very first Super Jenny was born. The name came up from a friend of my mother's who, over a cocktail one day, suggested it, and it stuck. The logo was written on a napkin by a good friend of mine, and we've never changed it since that very first day. My very first shop was this tiny 800-square-foot hole-in-the-wall in Buckhead. I mean, it was cheap rent. That was the number one quality of it. And the great thing that happens when you really don't know what you're doing, you sort of get to make up your own rules, right? We slapped some sunflower golden paint on the walls. I literally transferred all the photos of my friends and family from the walls of my apartment to the walls of the restaurant, because I figured if I was going to be working these long days, I wanted it to feel like home. And if you go to any of our restaurants today, you'll see the same thing, and it looks exactly like my house, so you don't even have to come there. I made a menu of things that I thought that people would like to eat, including this recipe from my dad for turkey chili. And that recipe is now our most popular seller, and I have to say that my dad, who turns 91, is here today. Yes, he denies the recipe, but it's all his. I got a friend of mine to commit to 6 months at least of working 12 to 14 hours a day with me. I mean, who does that? But I asked, and she did. We were so happy on the first day when we opened, and we made $300. I mean, it didn't matter that it cost me $500 worth of food. It was a start, and a start was something. Every morning at 5 o'clock when I would cook the food, and every night as we mopped the floor, I felt something, that I had never felt before, which was fulfilled. This is what I was meant to do. So from that moment on, for the next 20 years, everything went so smoothly, there was never a bump in the road, and I'm a bazillionaire. That's not true. Let me tell you a few things, because people always like to know the obstacles. I think I was a year in before my father gently explained to me what sales tax was and that I needed to pay it. I had to learn what food costs were and how much to make and how to keep it safe so it wouldn't kill anybody. I had to learn how to hire and sometimes fire people. And I had to learn how to take disappointment when I read my first bad Yelp review. There were so many lessons and so many mistakes, and I can tell you there's going to be a lot more. There's one more piece that I want to tell you about that I think it's important, whether you have an experience or not. There's no showing up by yourself. I haven't had the success I've had without an entire army of people behind me, and I consider it my personal mission to not only show up for myself, but my 46 employees that are incredible and keep the place running now that I don't even have to be there. They do such a good job. I was able to take 2 months off recently to do a one-woman play. I have to show up for my friends and my family and for my son because I'm still a single mom. And it just takes a community. So if I could tell all of you that today, not only show up for yourself, but think about everyone around you that helps you do what you do. So before I go, I have 3 things that I want to ask of you today. And they're things that have helped me get to where I am, wherever that is. The number one thing, I want each of you, there's 400 of us here today, to find 30 minutes in your life sometime before Christmas. And I want you to write down a vision of where you see yourself 1 year from today. And I want you to write it like you've already accomplished it. And I'll give you an example. I came to this event last year as an attendee, and the second I left, I wrote on my vision board, I wanted to do a TED Talk. So it works, right? And you just write it like it's already happened. Get it on paper. The second thing I'm going to ask you, be brave enough to share it with someone. Because once you put it out there, you start coming up with the tiny steps that can help you get to where you want to be, whether you have experience or not. I'm a living, breathing example that you can have some success with no experience. And number 3, I just want to tell you that everyone in this room has no more excuses. You should all be living the life you dream for yourself. You don't get any excuse. If you have no one that will support you, no one to listen to your ideas, I'm going to do something really big and bold here. I want you all to know my personal email address, superjenny@aol.com. Do not make fun of my AOL address. I'm willing to listen. I may not be able to invest in your idea, but I can listen, I can give you a nudge, and I can give you a push, because we all deserve to have a team of support that's going to show up for us. So I dare you. Email me. Have a great day.